we're going to start with a story. So I'm a growth consultant for startups, and I wanted to speak about digital while I switch the music on off in the background. Because I have a client who has a problem that a lot of clients have had over the years, and I just got really annoyed to see this problem again. We're going back up. So I have a client. I just started working with them. They, just in the talking, they said, oh, we send an email to all our users once a week. So I have somebody creating content and this email going out to all the people that subscribe to their software once a week. And I was like, wow, that seems like a lot of emails to send and a lot of content to generate. What are you actually sending to people that they care about? Like, what do they care enough about to get it 4 or 5 times a month for you? And so it turns out they are writing pretty good, quite engaging content. They have somebody who's their content writer, and they're writing quite high-level e-commerce stuff. So it's quite well done. It goes out in this email. You, as a buyer of their very specialized niche e-commerce software, you get a video, like an email of tips and advice on general e-commerce stuff 4 or 5 times a month. And I thought, well, it seems okay, but it doesn't really seem that effective because you have a really niche product and you're talking about very generic stuff. So why are you doing this? I'm like, well, we write the stuff and we put it on our blog, and actually it sends us a lot of traffic. And then I had the same questions. Well, okay, what happens with that traffic? Are people buying? And it turns out, no. They get a ton of traffic to very generic e-commerce blog posts, but those people don't turn into customers. Right? It's an audience that's very close to their audience, but it's not their audience. So they're generating a ton of content and time that they're investing into this every month. And they're producing something that has all the features of being successful. People generally like it. It's quite well written. It's getting traffic from Google, but it's not actually turning into any money. So that's what I wanted to speak about tonight. It's basically stopping yourself from doing stuff that doesn't bring you results with content marketing. So I've worked with tons of companies over the years, with startups and kind of agency side in the past. And I've seen this so many times where people just do stuff. Maybe when they start doing it, they have a reason. And then over time, it just becomes something they do. Like, yeah, we have this person that creates blog content, and their job is to create blog content. And 2 years later, that's completely disconnected from like what it was doing that was driving your business forward. So I just sat down and thought, okay, what should these guys get from their content strategy? Like, there's some obvious things that you're looking for, but can you get more out of it? And if you think about these things, can you change what you're doing to get more out of it and to optimize your strategies? So I'm going to talk about 6 things, and maybe in the pub later we can come up with a few more. So this is a very obvious one. This is why a lot of people start out writing stuff on blogs, because we're going to attract traffic from Google. There's a great example. I think this is Wistia. Everybody knows Wistia. They do video stuff. This is a brilliant video, which is why it came to mind. But they're here, which is with how to shoot video with a DSLR camera, and they're ranking for a term that they care about. So they know exactly the kind of queries that their customers are going to put into Google, and they're creating content for exactly the kind of people they want. So it's a very specific DSLR newbie owner who's going to put in that search query, and they want that person on their website. So they could be writing very generic stuff about video and video marketing, but they're writing very specific content to answer very specific questions. So the other thing you're doing it for, providing content for everything else you're doing. So you're going to distribute stuff via email. Maybe you're doing pay-per-click marketing. You want something interesting to share on Twitter or on Facebook or on LinkedIn. This is probably the best example I've seen. This is Cirque du Soleil. They do have pretty great content. During the Olympic Games, they had all these Olympic-themed pieces of content everywhere. Like every day, there'd be a piece of amazing content. Because a lot of I'm telling you their marketing spiel, right? a lot of ex-Olympic gymnasts are performers for Cirque du Soleil. So they have this beautiful tie-in that they could do with the Olympics. But the amazing thing was just how well they made these videos, how well they executed it. So they had a really great plan, they had really great content, but they also executed it perfectly. So the other thing you can do, and this was really what I wanted my client to do, was show people how to make money from your product. So if you have like a SaaS product, if you have something people are going to use, what would they be interested to get from you 4 or 5 times a month? Right? I have a whole lot of companies sending me generic e-commerce type emails 4 or 5 times a month. Actually, tell you what, show me exactly how to use your product. Show me exactly how to make some money or do something with your product. So it's super relevant, and I'm going to want to open everyone because there's something I care about inside. Right? So get away from the very generic stuff and show like how your product is actually going to make my life better. I'm likely to open those emails. So this is a very common example, right? So if you're Adobe, you want to be producing how to use Photoshop layer masks, right? Because that's the kind of stuff somebody who's working in Photoshop for their day job, they'll open it up, see what the lesson is, and watch the lesson. They don't really want to know very high-level generic stuff about images, but you can teach them something, and that's something that will get them opening up your emails. So I think the classic one, so I always look at like how can you teach somebody to do something, but also how do you create trust around your product? So a lot of your content can be focused around showing why we are the most trustworthy people in this field. I'll show you 2 completely different examples. So probably the best example is workout videos on YouTube, because you can trust this guy because you see how well he looks, right? So you're getting very trustworthy advice from this guy because you know he's doing the same thing. In a completely different way, this is Google's chief economist, Hal Varian. He wrote some of the original textbooks, I think, on economics. So a lot of people in economics will probably have studied some of his work while at university. And the other way they're boosting him is they're calling him a chief economist. I mean, if your company is big enough to have a chief economist, you must be worth taking seriously, right? Does anybody in the room have a chief economist at their company? No? Maybe you should make one. You know, it's like immediately, wow, I can trust these guys. So being Google, they've gone like, who is the guy that knows the most about this topic? And they've got Hal. And they've made him the chief economist. So like just slamming you with trust. So when you watch this video, he definitely knows what he's talking about. But there's a whole lot of other trust signals that are going on around it. One is his title. 2, he may be very well known. He's also a doctor, right? So that's something they could have added there if they'd wanted to. Something that I'm recently massively a fan of, and I think it's as a digital marketer, I'm kind of doing a lot more kind of PR stuff. So using your content as an opportunity to create goodwill with other people. So here's a great example. This is from Rainbow Six computer game, where they're featuring members of their community. So they're creating content around people in the community. It's very easy content to create, and it makes this person super happy because they're featured on the blog of this game. So one thing I'm saying to clients is go out, who are your users? Can you make something on the website where instead of 5 pieces of generic e-commerce advice, well, once a month, let's do a user heroes piece. And over a year, we'll have made our best users super happy because we featured them on our website. Can we do the same? Who could we partner with? Who's interesting in our space that we could interview other companies? Well, let's do great companies in the e-commerce space. So suddenly we're diversifying the content a little bit, but we're using the fact that we have these content production resources to reach out and make relationships with people. It's another one when I look. This is Hootsuite, and it's this whole 2.5-minute video with MailChimp, right? So they have kind of the same kind of audience. right? So this is how MailChimp use Hootsuite. And it's a beautifully produced piece of content, lots of different MailChimp people talking about how they use it and how great it is. So obviously you get this great piece of content, but what you also get is all these relationships that you build as Hootsuite. You're building relationships with all these people at MailChimp. And that opens future doors. I know a company I worked with last year, they were desperately trying to get onto another company was doing a lot of events in the States called, I think they were called Greenhouse. They're the recruiting software. They were doing a tour of the States. And the company I was working with was like, we need to go and somehow get on that tour with them because their users are exactly the users we want. And they didn't manage to do that. But the way you would manage to do that is figure out how to make these kind of relationships before you need to use them. Right? So using your content team to establish all these relationships. Was that 2 6s? Did I get that wrong? No. So point 6, using your content to support your business goals, really ties into the last one. So this, I get a lot of this. So this is the meetup for this event. Is Tony in the room? Before I embarrass him, I don't think so. But I get a lot of like this stuff, which is like, hey, can you promote my thing, right? Business money and you, I can make some money if I send some of you to his thing and all this kind of stuff. It's just like a spam email. But I have no doubt that there is like a person on the other side who possibly I could have done something with, would have been happy to promote their stuff. And I think there's a few other people in here who are trying to get me to pitch stuff or talk about their event or do whatever, right? And the way to do that is not to just send like a one-off email. The way to do that is come to the event, say hello, speak to me for a few minutes, say, hey, can I get in contact with you on Monday about something we're doing, right? So you're trying to create some kind of relationship before you ask for the thing. Like, so whatever you need to figure out, okay, what can I create that I can give before I ask? So the previous examples on kind of having a bit on your blog that's about users who are heroes and partners who are heroes, is you're using that to build the relationship with these people, and you can give them something first. You can say, well, we're going to feature you on our blog, and we'll send you traffic to your website, and we'll send some people who may buy your product, right? So you're really giving, and that lets you build a relationship where you can later, if you need to, ask for something back. So this comes from a lot of working as an SEO for many years, where the first thing you realize, you send out a lot of spammy kind of, hey, can I have a link kind of emails, and you realize that doesn't work. And what actually works is trying to build some relationship with a person before you do that. So if you're in a startup, you've got to figure out what can my startup do or build or create that's going to have value to people. So it might be like, let's have an event and ask people we'd like a relationship with to speak or do something with them. It might be, let's create something on our blog that's some way we can feature people. It might be, let's do video interviews with people and stick them on our YouTube channel. It's all like this, a whole from really simple to quite complex stuff you can do to build relationships and build some value and give people something before you ask for it later on. And your content strategy can really help you because you'll have people who are dedicated to writing something or creating something. The other thing is I get asked a lot about because I kind of work with companies that are just at the start of growing. They're like, what should we do in this space? What should we do in this space? So what do you need to deliver a content strategy? It's pretty much these 3 things. You need some way to produce content, some way to distribute it, and some kind of relationship building. So it's normally like a creative person, then an analytical person who's going to do like Facebook ads or Twitter ads and maybe measure stuff. And then you've got somebody else who may be out at events, right? Who's organizing the event, building relationships, opening doors, giving you an advantage some way. So these 3 things for me are what you need. That can be one person trying to do all 3 things or 3 different people. But it is 3 quite different skill sets. So this content production person, you want them to be able to write, You want them to be able to maybe produce infographic type stuff or videos and do interviews with people. You want to maybe figure out how to use a video camera, how to do online recording, right? And then content distribution is more like, how do I get that in front of the right people? Relationship building is open doors on a higher level so that the content person can then go in and work with somebody at a different company, or we get a lot of other opportunities from it. Some handy tools basically for that. Nobody seems to have done online video particularly well, but Zoom.us I find is pretty good for if I'm doing an interview online and it will record it. I did something now where I have a nice camera, and I went to Amazon and I bought the infinity screen and the lights and the stands and all that kind of stuff. It was like $65. So like all the stuff that goes around, the camera is pretty expensive, but everything else that makes it look quite professional is actually quite cheap. So if you're a startup, you can invest a little bit in a good backdrop and some good lights and produce quite decent video quality stuff just in your office, or get a meeting room and do it. You know, the Wistia guides before, the reason I remember that was because that guide using the DSLR was so good. And I used that when I was setting mine up. So you can do like quite simple video stuff really well in-house. You know, bigger stuff, like the stuff you'll see at the back, you can use a company like Wooshi. They'll just send somebody else to an event to film it for you. SpeechPad, I absolutely love, because I can do like a 10-minute video with somebody where we both speak, and I just send it to SpeechPad, and they send me the text back. And the quality is really good, and they're really quick. So if I'm creating a blog post, or I've got somebody that's interesting, and I want to get whatever is in their head, and they're not going to write a blog post, but they'll speak to me for 10 minutes. Right? So I'll just do a 10-minute Skype call or a 10-minute Zoom call, and I'll get the video, and I'll get SpeechPad to give me the text. And then suddenly I have a really great blog post because I have a video and I have all the text for it as well. Meetup.com, it's amazing. If you're doing events, it is pretty great. So this event is called the London Startup Growth Meetup because it has all the keywords I wanted. Right? And I don't really, did anybody see an advert to come here tonight? One? This is, one. Okay, so this is the first time this is the fourth event, it's the first time I did any advertising. I spent like a little bit on Facebook and a little bit on Twitter. But I think like the first 1,000 people signed up to this event just finding the event through through Meetup. Right, so it was, if you come up with some kind of concept that people may find useful, let them find it through something like Meetup. Right? You can build your own meetups and startups quite easily. I think there's also one important attitude that you need. And this is the thing that gets me the most. No production without measurement. So I'm not a huge fan of designers in the same way I'm not a huge fan of people that just produce content. So what I'd love to see is if people are producing content, give them a KPI that's not just traffic, but what's more important to your business. Is it signups, right? Is it actual sales? So whoever's creating your content or that content team, their measurements for success should not just be create something. It should be actually something that drives your business forward, right? Part of the thing you can do that is to give them a budget for each piece of content. Say, every time you write a blog post, there's £50 to promote it on Twitter and £50 to promote it on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever's right for your business. So give the person who's creating the content a very concrete business goal, but also give them a little bit of budget, give them what they need to try and reach those goals for you. And then let them figure out how to hit it. So what you'll have is like somebody maybe won't know what to do if all they've done is create content. They've never been responsible for what happens next. But give them a bit of money, let them find the audience as well. And as they find the audience, that'll help them create better content for that audience. So these two things go very much hand in hand. That might be just a bugbear of mine. So I see a lot of, and I guess this is the whole talk, right? is that startups tend to do a lot of stuff without measuring, without figuring out, is it actually helping drive us forward? So you can measure the impact of your content production, right? And you can give people, your content producers, also the power to make sure that it is successful. So if you give them a bit of money, they will start that thought process of, oh, okay, what do I need to do to make more useful content the next time? Right? They may start measuring themselves the output of their work in a different way. I'm going to end with two great content examples and why I love them. I want to see if John was involved with this one. Were you involved with this one? Yeah. A little. So we both John and I both used to work for this company. This was like the most amazing piece of content I've seen. It's called Messages in the Deep. It's the story of the underwater internet. And this whole page probably goes down about 4 floors beneath us. And on the page, there's videos, incredibly well-researched and well-written content. There is like JavaScript maps that play over time that show you how the underwater internet developed over the last, I don't know, 50 years, I guess. There's an immense amount of really interesting content that you can play with on this topic of the underwater internet. So I guess that probably took somebody a hell of a long time in the scale of month, like a month or months to produce all of this. But if you're a search engine, like this is probably the definitive piece of content on the underwater internet. Right? You would not show anybody anything else other than this. This is really a brilliantly done piece of content. But what I also thought when I saw this was actually it's going to attract links. People who will link to it will be very specifically in this niche. It's geeky enough and detailed enough that everybody else will link to it from within this niche. And I also thought it's the kind of content that you could actually have done Google pay-per-click ads on for underwater internet. Because the kind of geeky people that would do those kind of searches would be super interested in this. And those searches would also, they'd be very uncompetitive. You wouldn't be competing with anyone because they would just be informational searches and not buying searches. So you'd probably be the only ad up there for underwater internet or internet and driving people to those pages. So you could use this bit of content you could use pay-per-click to get even more very specific people to this piece of content who were very likely to share it or link to it. So as an SEO, I was just like, this is amazing. It's such a good piece of content. I could even do Google adverts on this, and it would power all of what I was hoping to get from the content, which would be links and shares. Maybe just put that in your phone and go Google for it and just see how well done it is. The last one. Does anybody know where this slide is from? Can we all read it? I'll read it. It's your first date. Do you split the bill, pay the whole bill, or have them pay the whole bill? Difference between men and women. So this is from Okcupid. Dating. Now I see some people nodding. Yeah, you could have put your hand up. And they probably have the best example of a blog that drove the success of that company. So back in the day, the Okcupid blog had all this kind of really interesting, very heavily data-driven content. Luckily, they had a really interesting topic. But a lot of other dating sites could have used this data in this way to create the kind of content that people would come to work and talk about and go, hey, did you see that thing from Okcupid on all these kinds of topics? That's what this blog did back in the day. So that drove Okcupid because it drove just so much awareness, but also drove links. And there's a blog from the guy who created this. And he said for each one of these posts, it took him over a month to build it. And that he needed to also work with their software engineers to extract data from the system. So this was massively, highly impactful for the company, this kind of content, but it took them a long time to make it. And that's what you can do when you stop measuring on just like how many blogs have I written, how much traffic have I written, and gone, okay, we need something that's really going to push our business forward, that's going to attract a ton of links and a lot of kind of voice and people talking about us. And that's what they did with this. It's really fun. Just Google the Okcupid blog. There's a ton of stuff. I had to choose like the least crazy thing, but there's a lot of stuff on like human sexuality on there. And you can imagine why people were sharing it and talking about it. This is the data behind human sexuality. Very interesting stuff. So I'm going to end there. I hope that was very interesting. Thank you very much.